especially sometimes some of us have grown up in families where there were a lot of verbal abuse. Honestly, this is something that I went through as a kid. And it's so hard because I remember a family member of mine when I was a kid. Maybe I was like 10 or 11 years old lang. Someone told me, "Nako, sa tigas ng ulo mong yan, dapat pala binasag na namin nung maliit ka pa lang para hindi ka na lumaki ng ganyan." And now that I'm almost 29, I'm turning 29 this year, I still remember those words. Like the words meaning, I wish we had just killed you or binasag na lang namin yung ulo mo when you were a kid because you're giving us so much trouble right now. And it scarred me. And that's one of the many ways that I experience that. And even if it's not as grave as that, seemingly harmless comments from elders about a family member's weight or appearance or career or education, that in itself could be verbal abuse, especially if it has a negative effect on your psychological health. Now, this isn't to say na, the normal, um, I guess merong thing called healthy teasing. Kasi meron talaga mga families that are very affectionate that way, di ba? They tease, they're silly with each other. It's not that. It's really deep emotional and mental hurt that people go through because of the words that are spewed at them. Tama ba to, Mishima?
Yes. Yeah, actually that is correct. Kasi minsan din 'di ba sa group of friends natin parang we somehow bully each other pointing
Mhm.
out our insecurities, 'di ba? 'Di ba we do that, but we also have to be careful with that, especially with friends kasi sometimes we are too comfortable na with our friends na hindi naman magagalit yan kasi alam naman nila na joke lang, but sometimes kasi we don't know what happens inside closed doors. So parang
Mhm.
friend mo nga close mo masyado, but you don't know that when they are alone, they think about it all the time. They question themselves na friend ko siya pero bakit niya nasabi yon. Parang those things, there's a fine line really. And I think
Mhm.
should be responsible in assessing kung hanggang saan yung line na yon na i-cross
Yeah.
natin even with friends and family. Parang iniisip natin na, di ba, pag when we were teased sa school, parang, ay, may gusto sa'yo yan kasi inaaway ka or something. Pero hindi pala siya ganun. There's so
Yes.
many ways nga to express if you like someone, if you're interested, but hurting them is not one of those things.
Yeah, I remember, when I started out in showbiz, one of the hardest experiences that I ever had. I was 18 years old. I started out in showbiz. It was my first day at work and I stand in the studio in front of all these cameras and the main cameraman said, "Oh, Joyce, wag ka nang kumain ah. Ang taba mo na eh." And then everyone started laughing. And you know how that affected me? I stopped eating for months. And all I ate was like an apple a day, a little bit of cereals, and I would constantly try to drink water. As iniinom lang ako naiinom ng tubig para feeling ko busog ako. Tapos I live off of an apple and some cereals a day because I was just so affected by what they said and how they all reacted. Like verbal abuse also is not just one person acting out, it's a group of people also kind of supporting that kind of behavior. Like you said, di ba, na niro-romanticize nila or hinahayaan nilang maging normal way of going about things yon.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, and sometimes nga, it becomes a greeting na parang, Oy, kumusta? Ang taba mo ah. Oy, kumusta? Ang payat mo ah. Parang, hello, why do
Yeah.
we still do that, diba? I mean, just say hi, kumusta, and that's it. Sometimes nga, our kumusta doesn't really mean kumusta talaga. You're just waiting for that second that you're gonna comment on the weight, on the appearance of the person.
Mhm.
So, mga ganon. Sometimes at the back of my mind, naisip ko, grabe. And all these things were happening na in the past, but it's just now, and it's very fortunate then that we have awareness now and people are more conscious about these things para napapag-usapan talaga. Kasi before, normal lang parang,
Yeah.
okay, okay lang, oo nga mataba na talaga, parang those things,
Mhm.
those kinds of comments.
Yeah, it's time to start a conversation talaga and really make sure that we create a culture that doesn't condone that kind of abuse. Okay, so Miss Shima, now that we've talked about it, the awareness and everything, now we have to also look into the actions that we can take to bring awareness to verbal abuse, right? So this may seem like a touchy subject that we'd want to avoid, but talking about it helps us to recognize it more and also to put an end to it. We may find friends or loved ones who didn't realize that they were in an abusive relationship because they didn't understand the signs. So, how do we go about this? How do we bring awareness? How do we call it out? How do we speak out? And how do we help others recognize this in their lives as well?
Firstly, I think self-awareness is very important. It is the first step talaga. And it multiplies kasi. Parang for me, parang projection na when you do something or exercise something, nakikita ng mga kasama mo and you become an example. So, mahirap kasi to just to just inform the victims na parang, you speak up, magsalita ka, wag kang papayag ng ganun. It's easy for us to say, but for them to really speak up, mahihirapan sila eh. So, for me, I don't want to put that burden to the victims na naman. Kasi victim na lang palagi ang nababurden for them to speak up eh. For us, individually talaga, it starts in ourselves and then it follows na yun sa mga kaibigan natin and we should make sure na we call them out. If we hear one, kahit when they do it to others, we call them out, we inform them na that's not good, that's not nice, and then para maging domino effect na din siya. Kasi I think may awareness naman talaga ang isa't isa, but it's uncomfortable kasi to parang lalo na pag kino-call out mo, tapos may comments like, KG mo naman, or parang, ito naman, hindi
Mm.
mabiro, parang nababurden ka pa na ikaw pa yung masama, ikaw pa yung KJ, hindi ka mabiro, sensitive ka masyado, but you just have to stand your ground. Parang don't lose hope. Parang just continue with it kasi eventually naman they will follow talaga if you live by example. So we'll start there talaga. Yun yung very basic. And then siguro encourage din. As I've said kanina, parang burden na masyado for the victims na pinipressure natin sila to speak up. Pero when we do that, but we accompany them also na parang I'm here for you, samahan kita. Kasi it's easy for us to say, sige na, magsalita ka, tapos hanggang dyan lang yung contribution mo. Hindi mo
Mhm.
naman sila sinasamahan step by step sa anong dapat nilang gawin, moral support. Eh, matatakot talaga sila or may hesitation talaga on their part. But if you commit yourself to stop it and then to encourage victims to come to speak up, tapos sinasamahan mo sila sa process, ginaguide mo sila, then it would be easier for them. Parang na-unload yung burden nila. And then it will have a domino effect nga, them to other people, and then it goes on and on. So basic lang siya, but I think it works yung yung ganong approach.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for that. I think the first one is so important, leading by example, like because you can keep preaching about not doing verbal abuse to other people, but if you don't do it yourself, if you're not careful with your words and the way that it affects others as well, um, it's so counterintuitive. It's so stupid to do that, to tell people to preach it like rules for thee, not for me. Ganon siya, diba? And yes, you're right. In supporting, sometimes encouraging victims to talk is one thing, but actually being there for them is another. Because victims have already gone through so much, as you mentioned. And sometimes they really need advocates alongside them to feel the courage. Because verbal abuse has such a great impact on a person's life, so much so that it will really haunt them, and it ruins their self-confidence. It ruins, it gives them anxiety. It ruins so many parts of them, and it touches on such vulnerable parts of who they are. Na if no one is there for them when they're trying to stand up for themselves, minsan mahirap talaga siya.